Hey there, everybody. Nice to see you all. Welcome to our prayer class. We are moving now through the Siddur, the prayer book, from starting at the very top. Last week we started with the very first prayers that we say in the morning, the Modeh prayer, the prayer of thanksgiving. Last fall, we started this class and we did some of the core prayers, Shema and Amidah, and those classes are recorded, so you can go back and kind of figure out how the Jewish prayer system started to begin with. But now we're kind of backing up and we're moving through the Siddur. The Siddur, the word Siddur is related to the word Seder, like a Passover Seder, and both of them are related to order. So it refers to the order in which we say our prayers, and we're going to follow that order. We started last week this process by looking at Modeh Ani, and I said it's the first prayer we say in the day, and the reason that we say that prayer first, as soon as we open our eyes before we do anything else, the technical reason that we say that prayer and no other prayer is because it doesn't mention God's name. And so then that gives us some indication of where we're headed, because we don't say God's name when we're still just like crusty in bed with, sleep in our eyes, because our body needs to be cleansed and readied for the day. So the next thing, and often the Siddur will take note of this, Modeh Ani, and then the next thing immediately there are the blessing over washing one's hands in the morning, Al Netilat Yadayim, which we also say before we break bread, and then the blessing over going to the bathroom, after going to the bathroom, Asher Yatzar. Both beautiful blessings, but I'm just naming them. We're not gonna spend a whole class going into that. I just want to name that after Modeh Ani, the next thing you would do is wash your hands and make a blessing, go to the bathroom and make a blessing, or opposite order. But those two things are the way that you prepare your body for prayer and cleanliness, actually. And I say all that because it is the next thing in the Siddur, but also because it's important to recognize that we wash ourselves and get clean, because it is going to be relevant for what we are doing today, which is taking a look at now the next thing that will happen in the Siddur. And again, it's a set of blessings, but this time it's blessing over two mitzvot that actually are named in the Torah herself, and that is the Mitzvah of Tzitzit. But for our purposes, what we're really going to think about is the Talit, or the Talus, and then the Mitzvah of Tefillin, which is such a funny. This is such a funny word, because the English word for tefillin, there is one. It's like phylacteries, which is like some Latin word I don't think has any other use. So there's no other word for tefillin, but tefillin is I've often thought, like, if you're at the TSA asks you, like, what's that in your bag, and you say, like, should you say my tefillin or my phylacteries? Like, neither would help. Right. So there's, and actually that's part of what we're going to think about, is like, what are these things? Because we don't actually, that's not even the word that's used in the Torah. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, tonight is a little bit of a bonus class, if you could think of it that way, because what we're going to do tonight, hopefully, is to really just build some primary Jewish skills. And that is just going to learn, how do we put on a talus and how do we put on tefillin. That's not the only thing we're going to do. Of course, we're going to go into the sources and try and figure out where these things came from, and also try to reflect, as we do, a little bit on the symbolism, the theology behind these commandments. And we're going to do a little demonstration. So we've got a lot to do tonight, and it may feel very instructional, but it's good, solid core Jewish knowledge that you're going to be getting tonight. And one last thing on that note, which is this, there's an asterisk there, a big asterisk, because both of the mitzvot that we're going to perform, I say, oh, good, solid Jewish knowledge, but the truth is they are very basic practices, very basic commandments, well known to Jewish practitioners all, but they are performed in a multitude of different customs with all kinds of different twists, and that there's no way to cover tonight all of the different variations, permutations, customs around these mitzvot. But we'll try to take some time, and feel free. I said it's going to be kind of instructional coming at you, but feel free to jump in and say, I've seen it different, I do it different, or even to put that in the chat. But don't be surprised if I do something and you think, well, that's not the way it's done, because there are a lot of different customs for doing it. Not that I don't make absolute mistakes, but in this case, when you see someone doing something different, it's usually because their family just had a different wrapping system or other kind of action around the ritual. Okay, let's say a blessing over a Torah study, and then we'll get started. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank God for giving us this space to study Torah so that we can understand the religion that we're trying to practice here, okay? So here is a source sheet tonight. And as I said, we're starting with, we're gonna go all the way back to the Torah, and not just to be thorough, but because that's the clearest and easiest source to use to get a sense of where Talus and Tefillin come from, okay? So here's a source sheet, and as usual, I'm going to share myself. So we'll start with Talus or Talit, and then we'll do Tefillin, and we'll take them one at a time. Okay, but we're doing that in that order because that is the order that we put these garments on in the morning. So you've said your moda'ani, you've washed your hands, you've gone to the bathroom, and now either you head out to the synagogue and you'll do these things in the synagogue. They'll be the first things you do in the synagogue, the shul, the minyan, or you'll do them at home, okay? As so many of us have been doing for the last couple of years, right? So let's begin. Let's take a look now with both of these practices. As I said, I want to go all the way back to the Torah because it's just really important to see that these aren't just fun customs that we collected along the way, but they're all based on things that the Torah the Torah herself is saying and saying explicitly. But in both cases, the Torah is using words that are a little difficult to figure out, and that's part of on that note. These two commandments begin. That is a little bit of a note of confusion. Like, what exactly are we being told to do? So let's take a look here. This is the mitzvah of Sitsit. Oops, that's wrong. Let's see, I was Googling all around. The mitzvah of Tzitzit. And here we go. I'm Googling for a good instructional video. I'm going to try to do some of the instructional for us, tonight, but I'll try to leave you with some extra material so that you can review. Okay, so Talit. Now, we'll note immediately, the first thing to note is that the word Talit, I think I already said it, is not mentioned in the Torah. Instead, the word in the Torah is tzitzit. The word Talit just means a garment, or literally a piece of cloth. One of the tractates of the Talmud famously opens with Shnayim ochzim b'talit, two people arguing over a garment because each one says, no, this is my garment. So it's a very basic word, talit, even though for us it has come to essentially mean prayer shawl. Okay, but the word that the Torah uses is tzitzit, and this is what the Torah says. The Eternal said to Moses as follows: speak to the Israelite people and instruct them to make for themselves tzitzit. This is the third paragraph of the Shema, so it should be familiar to some of us. To make for themselves tzitzit. Now, what are tzitzit? Well, it's usually translated as fringes, Make fringes, though, is not a phrase which has I easily understand. The word itself is related to sprouting. So little sprouts that come forth, things that sprout up out of the corner of the garment. And it has been used, this is the place where the mitzvah is described, but the word has been used prominently in one other place, the sprout word, and that is, anyone? The garments of the priest have the priest wearing a tzitz, some kind of diadem or something, I think is the word. Like, again, a kind of like an attachment, something sprouting forth from his head. So different garment, but that same language of a tzitz being like a little embellishment, a little sprout. Okay, so what's that going to look like? Let's keep going in the passage. They put them on the corners of their garments throughout the ages. Let them attach a cord of blue to the tzitzit at each corner. And this, you may know, is an extra detail in the commandment that we now don't always practice. In fact, it was customary not to put this blue string on for many, many years because the blue here is the particular blue known as techelet. There it is in the Hebrew, techelet. So the idea is you have strings on the corners of your garment. One of them is blue. But it was a custom to do that. And then there was a general consensus that we had lost in the struggle of exile. We had lost the tradition for getting the exact right blue. And so we stopped doing it. But some people now in the modern state of Israel believe that they have rediscovered the snail that makes the blue, and it must be that one. And so now some people do. It's actually, and this is a total aside, but you'll find that religious Zionists often use the blue, whereas other schools don't, because it's sort of embedded in their theory of like, we're back in the land and we're revitalizing the mitzvah. Okay, so just an aside, but there's that blue, which for our purposes mostly will not appear in our practice. Okay, so you do that, and now that's what you do. Now here's the reason, and I want to spend just a minute or two just articulating what this reason is. That shall be your tzitzit, vayelachem tzitzit, uriitamoto, and you shall look at it and recall all the commandments of the Eternal and observe them, so that you do not follow your heart and your eyes toward that which you lust after. All the things that might tempt you, you don't follow your eyes. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. Okay, so that's tzitzit. That is the origin of tzitzit. Now, why do we wear tzitzit? What is the reason? I think it was pretty clear in there, but can someone speak it out for me, just so we get that out on the table?
Supposedly the knots compose the 613 mitzvot.
Oh, okay, that's good. You actually answered with even more information, which is, let me just give the implied answer, which is that the tzitzit are there to remind you of the commandments. The tzitzit are there to remind you. Tie them on the end of your cornered garment, and quickly, by custom, because they talk about corners, quickly they start to. I just said by custom, but that's not the right word. By process of interpretation is what I mean. In the Talmud, they're using every little word to try and figure out, well, how do we do this? Oh, it must be only on a four-cornered garment. So the garment now has to be a garment with corners, not just any corners, but four corners. So now this obligation only applies on a four-cornered garment, and then you would put strings at the end. Now, Richard starts to answer a deeper question, a next level question, which is, well, how do they're tied in a certain way. Why are they tied in that way? And Richard is right, that by custom, they're tied, the amount of strings and twists and knots, and this level of detail we're not going to have time to get into, is supposed to add up, if you added them all up, to 613, the amount of the commandments. And so you look at the tzitzit and you remember the commandments. It's a little bit of a funny thing, like they're tassels and you wear them, and I guess you're just always remembering the commandments. The Talmud has a very vivid and telling example of how this might happen, where a student goes to a prostitute and starts to get undressed, and then all of a sudden sees his tzitzit and says, "Oh my gosh, what was I thinking?" So there's like, there it is in action, and it's playing on this language of the things your eyes lust after, right? So, I mean, I don't know, like if you wear it and maybe it is supposed to kind of like they become like undergarments or protecting garments. And I wonder if it does have that kind of connotation of protecting your loins as well. But really it's meant just for reminding you of all the commandments. Okay, that's the point of tzitzit. But that, we have a problem now. That's not talus. That's not talit. That's not a prayer shawl. That's any four-cornered garment that you might wear would have these on it at all times. Okay. Now, as I say at all times, I have to stop and tell you that both of these commandments take us into all kinds of like gender conversations, complicated gender conversations in especially modern Judaism, but actually you can find throughout the sources where ultimately in the course of tradition, both of these commandments became associated with men and not women. And maybe the obvious reason for that is just the reason that the commandments get divided by gender altogether, which is from a passage in the Talmud that says that women are not obligated in positive time-bound commitments, meaning commandments is what I mean to say. Meaning if positive, like not negative, like thou shalt not kill, or don't eat, pork, any no, we're all obligated in the same way. And any yes, like honor your parents, we're obligated in the same way. But if it has to happen at a particular time, men are obligated and women are exempt. Not forbidden, but exempt. And that's crucial. I'm like giving you a 2-minute version of a very complex and ongoing gender conversation. But because they get rendered as time-bound commandments to fill in and tzitzit, they get assigned to men, and women are exempt. And then sometimes there's a further question, well, but are they allowed to? Surely they're allowed to. And then we get into other Jewish legal concerns, like, well, maybe this is now considered men's clothing, and there are prohibitions on cross-dressing in the Torah, right? Only to take us to yet another complicated gender conversation. I want to signal all of that so that you know, and because it's clear when you visit different communities that you'll see men wearing talit and tefillin and women not, or some women not. For our purposes tonight, we those of us who are able to pray together in an egalitarian practice where women and men are presumed to have the same obligations in the mitzvot. So I'm just going to presume that for the rest of the session, but just know that there is a very complex conversation that exempts or even sometimes discourages women from putting on talit or tefillin, though, there are women who have throughout Jewish history as well. Okay. But I said that it's time bound. And why is it time bound? It shouldn't just be any old time you're wearing a four-cornered garment, you would put tzitzit on it. That's not bound by time. That's not the concept of time bound. That's just like whenever it happens, it comes up and you do that. Well, technically, the answer to that is that the language says that ritamoto, you should see them. Oh, what is the time when you see them? During the day and not the night, so they become daytime commandments. Okay, this is the logic of the Talmud, but that is it is important that tzitzit themselves are daytime commandments, and now it's not the night but the day, and then even so, that doesn't sound like a prayer commandment. That sounds like any old time. And indeed, tzitzit are interpreted as something you would wear all day, anytime you have a four-corner garment. And that usually manifests itself in what we call a talit katan, a little talus, right? Just a little tzitzit that you would wear under your clothes that would have the tzitzit attached to them, right? And that you might wear separately from just all day long. But that is that would fulfill the basic commandment of tzitzit. Now, how do we get to talus, this other bigger, not talit katan, the little garment, but the big garment that we use specifically during prayer? Okay, so in order to try and figure out where we got that, I actually want to jump straight to the instruction given by the great code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch, which is published in the 1500s. And just as he begins to tell us about the mitzvah that we think of as putting on your talus, your talit, you can already see that there's something different in the language that he's using from the language of tzitzit, okay? So let's take a look at the language that the Shulchan Aruch uses to describe the mitzvah that we associate with prayer. And I see a hand out there. Payam, do you want to jump in now or just wait a second until I show this?
I have a question for now.
Yeah, please.
Is corners the right word? Because our clothes, men's clothes, don't have corners. Human beings are round. Like the only thing I can think of that has a corner is like a poncho. And, I mean, were clothes different then? Like, it doesn't make sense for me to say put on the corners of your clothes when clothes don't really have corners.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to, we would need an archaeologist to speak more authoritatively to this, but I think my imagined response, like my imagined history's response to that is, yeah, the clothes were different then. And like things like ponchos and cloaks and wrapping yourself up just in a garment was a more common thing to do. But honestly, I don't know if I'm speaking from like, you know, movie images or reality. I'm not sure. But I think the answer is yes, clothes were different then, and the kind of intricate, like many corners or no corners at all, clothes that we have don't seem to. That's why we have to come up with this little piece of fabric. That's why we have like an extra one instead of just having the tzitzit at the end of the poncho that we would wear throughout the day. I think that's exactly right. That having a cloak and walking around with a cloak was a thing you did in the Torah is sort of speaking to those with cloaks, right? Those just walking around with their cloaks. Okay, great. So here is the language, and now we begin to see like what we might see in a prayer book itself, the instruction for how to put on your talit in the morning. And what he says here, just pay attention to the language. One should wrap oneself in a fringed garment and make the blessing over it while standing. Yitatef b'tzitzit v'yivarech me'umad. Now, I cited this in part just to like slip in the information that yes, these blessings and these rituals are performed standing up. Okay, so that's good to know just in terms of how do we do it and what you know, always good to know whether you're standing or sitting. But what other language do we see here that's new? It's not the language of the fringe garment. That's the same language, but tzitzit. He doesn't use the language of talit. But what is new? What do we see that we haven't seen before? You see people doing it visually. Wrap yourself. Lihitatef. Okay. Wrapping yourself in a tzitzit. All right. A garment that has these fringes. Now, the language of wrapping yourself up, that's talus language. That's prayer language. And the actual prayer shawl, right? There's one mitzvah, which is tzitzit, but the actual prayer shawl is taking the mitzvah of tzitzit and making sure that you have a nice big four-cornered garment to use during prayer and wrapping yourself in it. Now, why do we wrap ourselves up during prayer? Well, in some ways, I don't have a great answer. In some ways, I have a spectacular answer. I mean to say, I don't have a great answer because it's not clear where the wrapping comes from. And there are various descriptions in the Talmud of rabbis who would wrap themselves up and go out into the fields and pray, or wrap themselves up it does seem to be that it simply was the practice. And on that level, I think, as probably many of you would intuit, that it has something to do with just being focused and being in a cocoon, to actually create a kind of a tent for yourself so that when you pray, you can be in your zone. That's a visceral experience of it. And I assume that was part of the experience that our sages were having. But there is actually a source for the wrapping, but it's a spectacular one, but it's a wild one. It's not like, oh, well, they used to wrap that before they prayed. No, it's not the rabbis. It's not like some dude once upon a time did this. The original wrapper, the primary source that we use for the wrapping is the Holy One, the Holy Blessed One. And it comes from this midrash. So take a look at this beautiful midrash. And maybe here we can begin to get some understanding of what the symbolism of the Talit is. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yehotzadak asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, since I heard that you are a master of legends, Bal Agada, tell me, from where was the light created? How about that for a question? Where was the light? From where? How did God create that first light? Right? First moment of creation, let there be light. How did that happen? And Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman answered and said, Milamed, the text teaches that the Holy Blessed One became wrapped up in it like a cloak and made the splendor of God's glory shine from one end of the world to the other. Okay. Now, I don't even understand this image, but I love it. The Holy One wrapped God's self up in the light, like a cloak, but it also sounds like from that cloak of light, God projected light out into the world. And listen to this. He told him this legend in a whisper. So it's like, these are secrets you shouldn't know. And he said, there's even a full verse on it, meaning there's a hint to this in a verse in Psalms. And the verse in Psalms, which really is the source for Talit, even though it's just poetic theology. You are clothed in glory and majesty, wrapped in light like a cloak. You stretch out the heavens like a curtain. Okay, so that is some beautiful language. And actually, it is the most often referenced source for Talit. So now, why do we wear Talit? We wear it because it reminds us of the commandments. And we wear it because perhaps it's good to wrap yourself in prayer just in general. But we also wear it to emulate the way that God wrapped God's self in light in that first moment of creation and then radiated the light out onto the world. Now, what that means, I don't know exactly, but it does seem to suggest that that's maybe part of what you're doing with your Talit, is that you're like summoning powers to radiate your prayers forth. Like you'll project them from this little silo that you're, okay, I'm already waxing poetic here. I don't know exactly what it means, but that source is the source. And so it's worth noting that this custom of the Talit has some very lofty imagery associated with it. I'm seeing Leah has a hand.
Yeah, Rabbi Kasher, you were doing it yourself, making the spiral, the snail shell. I think it's no accident that it's the snail that gives us the blue. Our biology, there's so much spiraling going on in plants and animals on a macro level and at a very, very microscopic level. And I think the case could also be made for this in what we call the stars or the galaxy or something. I think it's great.
Yeah, I love that. The great spiral of like some sort of like great, like DNA helix vortex, some sort of core thing that like you're just like, you're in some kind of centripetal force and you're wrapping yourself. I mean, you're at the center of the maelstrom that creates the world, right? Amazing. But I mean, again, I don't know what to do with that. I'm not sure, but something to meditate on as we put on our talit. Okay, speaking of putting on our talit, that is the background, but the primary thing I wanted to do tonight is to actually just demonstrate how this is done. And it's not too complicated, especially with talit. Tefillin gets a little more, but I'm going to actually just show you the method for putting on talit. Usually you would take the talit out of a talit bag. Both of them, I already have my talit out of my talit bag, but here's my tefillin bag, and there's usually a bigger one for talit. Now, I'm just going to show you the various stages, and I must say, even as I teach this, it's so kind of filtered through the way my father told me to put on my tefillin, that I just have, like, it's in my bones, but more that it's in the code of law. I may do things that are particular to me. Again, there are customs all over the place here, but here are the basics. So you take out the talit, and the first thing you would do, let's see if I can, so what's the best way to do this? Actually stand? Yeah, I'll actually stand. Okay. The first thing you would do is put it over your shoulder and then just check the strings. You'll see people often first checking the strings just to make sure that they're not knotted or tangled, right? This is the actual mitzvah. And so you'll see people with the talit like this, all of the strings together over the shoulder, and then just checking. Okay, seems like they're good. So now, and note there are 4 of them here, right? 1 on each corner. Okay, now the next thing I would do is open it up. And the part that will go on your head here is called the Atara, or the crown, right? That's up here at the top of this garment. Now, what you will do, though, is actually turn it backwards. So the Atara is facing you. And the reason is because you're going to do a twirl. Okay, you're going to do a twirl and put it over your head, right? So it's easy enough to do, because now once the Atara is facing you, just take your hands and put them behind you. And it's litatef. You have to wrap yourself in it. And so that means you have to become completely surrounded by it. And it has to go at least over your face. Okay, there. Now, I didn't yet say the blessing, and the blessing would be said at this moment, right? I've checked it. I put it out before me with the Atara facing me, and then I would say the blessing. Here, let me see if I can put it on screen. And the blessing is, there it is. Oh, I should have transliterated it. I'll edit this document later. You can come back to it and I can transliterate it. But the blessing is, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehitatef batzitzit. To wrap ourselves, that's that language of wrapping, to wrap ourselves, lehitatef batzitzit, in tzitzit. So I say the blessing right now as I go, Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehitatef batzitzit, and then I twirl it over myself and cover myself in it. I cover myself completely. And now there's one more. This is not everybody does this, but my father did this. There's one other custom, which is there's a custom to now let the whole talit drape over you like this, and then to throw all 4 of your tzitzit over your left shoulder. Over your left shoulder. Okay. I actually don't know why. I should have looked it up, but it's just like, it's a thing. It's a thing. And my father did it. So, but I think it's like a further accentuation of wrapping yourself. So you have to completely wrap yourself. So you all right, let me just do that one more time, and then I'll put on the talit completely. Okay, so I take it out, I put the Atara facing me, I make the blessing, I twirl it over my back, and then I cover myself in it. I may take the whole thing and throw it over my shoulder like a continental soldier. And then here, we get into another debate in practice. The Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says that you should wear the talit over your head, like this. But there are others who disagree, and you will see it's very common in Ashkenazi practice for the talit to just rest on your shoulders. The Hasidim, I grew up with Hasidim, are very insistent that it should be up here above your head, and that this is, after all, called an Atara, a crown. So you'll see different practices around that. It's easier to hear this way, but there's more perhaps focus this way. And the other
Kasher,
thing, one last thing, and the other thing is that this is like an important. You'll have it just like draped over you. It's an important thing to important move here to be able to grab one corner and then fling this up above your shoulder. Same thing on the other side, and you'll notice Rabbi Brow's always making jokes because she has small shoulders, and so they keep falling off. Right, I have big shoulders, so I don't have that problem. But this is what it looks like fully on you, and there would be tzitzit in the back, 2 and 2 in the front. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Who was?
Unfortunately, because you were sharing the document the entire time, all the imagery of you was like in a teensy tiny tile for us, rather than big on the screen, which would have been so much better.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
The whole time?
Oh,
I
I
only
thought
heard
you
the
were-
blessing for a second.
I'm sorry,
No.
you have to use speaker view to see the full screen.
I did.
Okay. All right.
Rabbi, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Why I know about the Talit, but I never understood why it was in black, and what do the stripes mean, and how many stripes are there? I never really looked at it. Now I'm looking at it and I'm saying, what is the reason of the stripes on the Talus?
So that's also custom. That's also just, and you'll see some that don't have stripes and some that do, and some that are white and some that are black. Where the customs come from, I don't know, but the particular designs are, I mean, it's like, one of those things where it's like, oh, this is the way Moses was wrapped in the basket. But I don't know, actually. Somebody else might know better where the actual design of the stripes come from. All right, let me do this one more time. I thought I only shared the blessing for a second, but okay, let me do this one more time. So hold it out in front of you, make the blessing, the Atara is facing you, right? Then flip it over back, right? And then cover yourself with it. Now you've done the mitzvah. The extra bit is to grab all 4 corners and throw them over your shoulder, and then put them back either just on your head or drape them down to your shoulders and fling the sides like this. Okay.
I have a question that may
Sure.
be probably more in the weeds than most people. As some of you know, I weave Talitot, and I'm in a Facebook group where I end up having conversations with people about the rules for the construction of Talitot. And I'm just wondering if there's some other sources. I've had an argument with somebody who says it has to be a cubit wide. What's a cubit? Is it 20 inches? Is it 24 inches? About content of the fabric. I have a feeling it's more in the weeds than most people are interested in, but I was wondering if you have any other sources that I could take a look at.
Yeah, it is. It's more than we have time for tonight. But yeah, there are all kinds of debates over exactly how big this garment has to be. You'll see entire communities that use these massive talitot because like their rabbi holds that you have to have a really full-sized garment. Yeah, a little beyond our capacity tonight, but I'll try to send you some information on that. I will also say that it isn't just that there are different customs, but that the process by which we get to the mitzvah, the tangible practice that we have in front of us, is a process that takes pages and pages of Talmudic debate. And so it's just, it's not just custom, but it's law, but it's law that takes a long time to summarize how we got from there to here. I'll give us just a little bit of a taste of that now that we turn to look at the mitzvah of tefillin, because in the mitzvah of tefillin is more intricate, and the process by which we get to from the Torah source, which is even more opaque than tzitzit, to the practice itself, is a long process of discussion, but we'll see just a snippet of it tonight. Okay, let's move now to tefillin and try. We only have a short time left, but let's see if we can do this in 18 minutes. Okay, so we started with Talit, and we started in the Torah. And the same is true for tefillin, all the more so. All the more so because this really is the primary source for tzitzit in the Torah. There's one other place that sort of mentions it, but this is the only one that uses the language of tzitzit. But there are actually 4 places in the Torah that speak of tefillin. 4 places, but they're never called tefillin. They are instead called Totavot. Or another title to this section could be, what are Totavot? Right? I sort of have answered the question by saying that we've come to understand these to be tefillin, but part of the problem is it's very unclear what these words mean altogether. So let's take a look. And this is one of the most famous passages in the Torah. And I said there are 4 mentions of Totavot in the Torah, but this is the source. This is the one, and it's because it's in the Shema itself. So hear, O Israel, Shema Yisrael, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the eternal, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, all your might. This is the Ve'ahavta. Take to heart these instructions, which I charge you this day. Teach them to your children. Speak of them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you rise. We've talked about this because this is the source for saying the Shema itself. But then comes this line. Bind them, tie them, ukshartem la'ot, bind them as a sign on your hand, al yadecha, and let them serve as totafot between your eyes, and let them be totafot. That's that word here, between your eyes. Now, if you've seen tefillin before, you can see how something on your hand and something between your eyes does sound like what we eventually take to mean tefillin, just as much as the next piece, inscribe them on the doorposts of your house, on your gates. That clearly is the source for a mezuzah, but the word for mezuzah is right here, whereas this word we don't actually use. We pick a different word, and partially it's because we don't really know what this word is. Okay, now we don't know what this word is, but we do know what this word is. That is a sign. They are a sign. And that is the first and an important symbolic thing or a meaning of tefillin that I can offer, which is that tefillin are considered an oat, a sign. Now, to give us some sense of the significance of a sign, let me just mention some other signs in the Torah. Cain was given an oat, a mark, upon his forehead, no less. So maybe that's an early source, although we don't usually make that connection. The rainbow was an oat, a sign that God would never again destroy humanity, a sign, okay? What else is a sign? Circumcision is thought of as a sign. Okay, so you're beginning to get a sense, it's a physical symbol that is meant to communicate something when you see the symbol, okay? So those are some of the otot. One other that is probably significant for our discussion here is that the lamb's blood on the door during Passover is considered a sign. And then when we're told to remember God with all of these other signs, there's a way in which we're now the mezuzah is like the blood on the door, right? This too is a sign. These things that you place on your hand and between your eyes are also a sign. Okay. Now, here's the funny thing about the word totafot. We don't know exactly what it means, but because it's there, we feel in the tradition, I'm speaking on behalf of the tradition, if I may, we feel that we must find some kind of physical, tangible object. Because it's one of the most striking interpretive moves in Judaism, because the rabbis are so want to take a biblical verse and tell you, no, it doesn't mean what you think it means. It's actually something much more symbolic or abstract. But in this case, they are hyper literal. In other words, when we look at this passage, bind these words as a sign upon your hand and let them serve and let them be between your eyes, you would think that meant carry these words with you always. Let them be in front of you at all times. Have them on your, with your hand, you can see how we could start to say, the movement that you do in the world and the sight that you could turn this into, just keep these words before you at all times. But there's that Totavot word. And so the rabbis thought, no, there's some actual thing that you actually have to put on your hand or your arm. You have to actually put on your between your eyes. Okay, so the question is, what is that thing? It's not explained in the Torah. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of Talmudic discussion of that. The code of Jewish law, if I looked at the laws of tefillin, they are so voluminous. I mean, you could just, there's a whole chunk of law just on tefillin alone, right? But let me just show you one moment of legal development that both gives you a sense of what they're trying to do and also a sense of a little bit how lost they are. And this is just like I always remember this moment in the Talmud because it really does give you this sense in a clear way of just them trying to come up with interpretations here. So here's a debate. Okay, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael says, it is taught it shall be a sign upon your hand and for Totavot between your eyes. It's taught that in Exodus 13. They also mention Totavot between your eyes in Deuteronomy 6, 8. And they also mention Totavot in Deuteronomy 11. Now, these are 4 altogether. Now, the truth is, those are 3 altogether. And what he means is that the 3rd time it's written with more vowels, so there must be an extra one. And it is the strangest thing because there's actually a 4th place where they're mentioned. He could have just said that, but for some reason he doesn't say that. That's already confusing. But the reason that he's saying, 1, 2, 3, 4, is because the tefillin themselves hold 4 passages, the 4 passages where tefillin are mentioned in the Torah, and there is a debate whether each passage requires its own section in the tefillin or whether they all go together. Okay, it's sort of seems like talk about in the weeds, but there's a debate. Do tefillin need to be 4 little boxes that each have one of the passages in them, or is it one box? I mean, the very fact that we're talking about boxes is already presuming a whole world of Talmudic discussion, but is it one box or is it 4 boxes? And the answer, which you'll soon see, is that we go one way with the arm tefillin and one way with the head tefillin, okay? So that is so complicated. If you didn't follow that, don't worry. I mean, and not only that, but he used 3 sources to make his case for 4, just like playing with vowels instead of. Okay, it's a lot, but I brought all this to give you a sense of what they're doing in the Talmud, but also take a look at what Rabbi Akiva says. He says, you know what? You don't need to do all that counting of all the places. I'll give you the true source for 4. And what he says is, no need for all of your interpretation because tot in katifi means 2, and fot in Afriki means 2. Now, I don't know where these this language seems to be African, which is not a language, though maybe it was to Rabbi Akiva, the way the Africans speak. I don't know. Katifi, I'm not sure what that is. Some other region but he says this word is a hybrid word that means 2 and 2, and so you have 4 altogether. But it's like that makes no sense. Like the Torah is using a hybrid of Kafiti and Afriki to tell you. It's like talk about in the weeds. Now we're in like language weeds as well. But the point is, here is the Talmud trying to figure out what these Totavot are, and you can see that in a sense they really don't know, but they're trying their best to figure it out. Okay, and now we're going to take a look at what they came to. Okay, so before we do that, let's quickly, we just have 8 minutes left, so just very quickly take comments from Matt and Ariella. Matt?
Just real quick,
Yeah.
and I put this in the chat. There are tefillin, physical tefillin, that are from 2nd century BC, meaning pre-Talmud, meaning that there are boxes with the prayer. So there were somebody interpreting Torah in this complex, specific way while we still had a temple. So rabbinic Judaism existed at that time. Somebody is sitting and interpreting in a complex, specific manner, individual practice Judaism while we still have a temple.
That's
And
great.
To me, that's a
great.
mind
That's right.
blowing.
Matt mentions it's like it's sort of uncharacteristic for Matt, because he's saying no, this goes all the way back. The rabbis are truly the carriers of the tradition. But in a way, he's not saying that, because in a way, what he's saying is they're coming up with things, but really they just have a practice that they know has existed for a long time. They're trying to figure out how to make sense of it. So, like, how do we get from Totavot to these things? And maybe the process actually happened before the rabbis, Matt is saying, and that's quite possible. It really does get to a very important question that we can't answer fully tonight, as to whether the rabbis are carrying an ongoing tradition and just trying to explicate it, or whether they are coming up with the tradition. Right? I would have usually expected Matt to take the latter, more critical position, but in this case, Matt's just the facts, So in
Just
this
the
case,
facts.
the tradition goes back further. Yeah, very nice. Ariella?
And I am bringing it to right here, right now. One of my cousin of mine had to fill in with the gender changed in the parchments. So that, I think, from what she said, was a first, that
The gender of
the scroll inside.
Meaning the gender of God, maybe.
Yeah, probably, knowing my cousin, the rebel of the family.
All right. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a modern approach to a mitzvah that has been traditionally denied to women. Right? It doesn't say anything about gender in the commandment, but perhaps like what she did was regendered God itself, and that would be a kind of a twist on the twist, right? So that's good. I like
so
very nice.
Hey,
I see more hands. I have 5 minutes, and I just want to make sure I actually put on my tefillin. And again, tefillin also are. It's not clear whether there's daytime or nighttime or prayer time. Eventually. The rabbis decide they should only be worn during the day, just again because of clean body concerns. But as far as late as Maimonides, the rabbis are saying you should wear them all day long. That's the best thing. But eventually they say, well, that's not practical, or you can't keep your body clean all day long. So at least wear them in the morning for your prayers. And in fact, next week we'll look at morning blessings. And one of the morning blessings is who crowns Israel with glory. And that blessing is thought to be one of the reasons we put on tefillin in the morning, because we have to have the crown on us when we say that blessing. Okay, I only have 4 minutes left here because I really do try to keep these to 1 hour. So let me just take you through the actual, what they call the laying of tefillin, and try to just actually take us through the ritual so we have at least that before we close tonight. Obviously, I'm racing through 2 mitzvot that each of which requires like a much fuller treatment, but our goal is just to know what we're doing in the morning and a little bit of why we're doing it. So I hope we have the why behind tefillin, though we haven't done a lot of good processing, but we have some sense that it's a sign, and it's a sign that harkens back to the same things that mezuzah harkens back to, that the Shema itself harkens back to, which is just the memory that God is one and that God is the one who took us out of Egypt. Okay. All right, you have your talit on. Maybe you have it on like this. Maybe you have it on like this. You open up your tefillin bag. You pull out, and you'll have to get used to which side they're on. That's like part of the muscle memory that you learn. But I always reach to the left where my tefillin shel yad are, the hand tefillin. Now, I'm going to try not to block the screen, so I'll try to go back and forth, but let me show you how these things are written out in the Siddur. So the Sefaria Siddur is helpful here because it has some of the instructions. Okay, so first, place the tefillin on the arm, on the muscle of your left arm, and before tightening it. Notice that with both talit and tefillin, you say the blessing before you do it, just like you would say a blessing before eating, before you ate, right? So let's see how this works. So I unwrap it, right? And usually the tefillin come in a little protective box. I take it out of its box. Okay. It is tied in such a way, and it comes this way, that near the box, there's like space for you to pull out, and this is what you're going to stick your arm through. Okay. Now, everybody can see me, right? Okay. Now, if you are right-handed, you put the tefillin on your left hand so that you have your right hand free. If you're left-handed, you put it on your right hand, and I'm left-handed, okay? Not that that matters with Zoom, you never know where anyone is anyway, but this is what you'll do. And, you know, I almost changed my shirt to a short sleeve shirt so that I could show you it with ease, but instead I figured, no, I should actually show you that it is one of the great frustrations of my life that I don't know how we're meant to do this, but whenever you're a man and you're wearing one of these, like, or a woman wearing a shirt designed for men, somehow they don't have space here. So they don't pull all the way up, and I end up having to, it's really annoying, and I've struggled with it my whole life, and maybe I just have thick arms, maybe it's not a problem for other people, but I want to say that it's always like tricky getting into a rhythm where you feel comfortable putting on your tefillin. Now, you want to put it on, and it says in the sheet I just showed you, it says on the muscle. There are debates over where exactly on the muscle, but I was told to put it like as if you were making a muscle in the dent, right, that would be closer to your shoulder. So I put it on here. Okay, up here, all the way up here. Now, here's the important thing, the thing that we will all share, though a lot of this will look different than you're going to do because we all have our own customs. I'll explain that as we go. But the point is, you say the first blessing at this point before you've laid tefillin. Lahaniach tefillin is the ending to that blessing. To lay tefillin, to lay it upon yourself. So I would say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahaniach tefillin. Okay, and then I would tighten it. Now, my custom. The Hasidic custom is to wrap outward. But the Ashkenazi custom, I think, is usually to wrap inward. So at this point, we're diverging in customs, and I don't want you to take what I'm doing as any kind of authoritative practice, but I have to do my own. The tefillin should be pointing towards the heart, and you wrap them, as you see here in your instructions, you wrap them first 7 times on the arm. Wrap the strap around your arm 7 times and then place the tefillin of your head on your head. So we'll get to that eventually. So I've said the blessing, and now I wrap 7 times. Now, I remember very clearly my father telling me, you wrap it once around your upper arm, that doesn't count. Once around your lower arm, that doesn't count. Because these are both just securing wraps, is what, the way my father explained it. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And that's a little sloppy, and they should be neat and not overlapping. And there's probably more precise instruction that I could give at another time. But the basics is you have 7 straps here, right? And then before you keep going, wrap the rest just around your hand. Okay. You're going to come back to this. But first, you make the blessing, then you tighten and 7 down your arm, with this one not counting and this one not counting. And again, some people go inward, some people go outward. When it comes to wrapping techniques, we're going to need another session. Okay, now I pause. And the custom is to make sure you don't say anything in between these 2 blessings. Now, why are there 2 blessings? Why are there 2 blessings? Because it's not clear whether the the mitzvah is a hand and a between the eyes mitzvah, or is it one full mitzvah? So there's enough debate in the tradition that we say a blessing which seems like it should cover both, but we say another blessing afterwards in case the head tefillin is separate. Okay, so that's the answer. So I'm talking for the educational purposes, but if you're doing this, you will specifically not talk. At this point, you're focused, you're in your mitzvah, and I pull out now from my bag I see Ariella spotlighted. Does everyone see me spotlighted? That's just my screen, I think. Okay, and then you pull out the head tefillin. Again, take it out of its box. And this is probably the last really important key piece of like how-to information. And I just want to say it's really, pay attention because this is one that we often get wrong. You put the tefillin on, now you'll say the other blessing here. I'll switch back so we see the other blessing. You're about to place your head tefillin on. And before you do, this one is after you do. Okay, because it's going to close the ritual. So this one's before you put on your arm. This one's after you place on your head. And this one's a more general, Asher Kidishanu b'mitzvotav tzivanu al mitzvat tefillin, on the mitzvah of tefillin. Okay, here's how you put it on your head. Now this is really important. It goes on your head, and yes, between your eyes. It goes between your eyes, but not between your eyes like this, and not on your forehead. In fact, it should be resting above your hairline. The bottom should hit your hairline, okay? So it looks like this, not like this. No, yes, okay? It's there between, and you know, some people carry mirrors around, they check, they make sure. Okay, but that's it. And then the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mitzvat tefillin. Okay. Now, back to, I see I'm a little bit over time here, so we'll close up soon, but let's just finish off the ritual. Okay, once the tefillin is on your head, there are all kinds of recitations that these are standard and you'll see them in the prayer book. One is to say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. The same thing you say after Shema. So that's why it appears here. One is a Kabbalistic recitation that seems to see the tefillin as kind of a medium for channeling energy. So may you impart from your wisdom to me, God Most High, and give me understanding from your understanding. With your loving kindness, do great things with me. With your merit, cut off my enemies and opponents. Pour bountiful oil upon the 7 branches of the menorah in order to cause goodness to flow to your creatures. Open your hand and to fulfill the will of every living thing. That is not as essential as the blessings themselves, but you'll see that recitation in there. And I wanted to just close with this last thing that you often see. And this last piece you say as you are wrapping the rest of, remember, come back to your tefillin, and you're wrapping the rest of your tefillin around your fingers. Now, this is really where custom dictates. Lots of different customs on how to wrap them. I do it like this. I go to my middle finger and wrap 3 times, and then once around the middle and second middle finger. But this doesn't matter. At this point, it's like, you don't need to pay attention to this because this is just my custom, but I'll show you what it looks like in the end. This is what my tefillin look like. A lot of the wrappings play around with the shin symbol, like the shin that you'll often find on a mezuzah as well, right? So there are various customs. Maybe your family has one. Maybe there's a standard one that you can learn on the internet, or I'm happy to teach anyone that wants to learn my way. But while you're wrapping your tefillin on your hand, you say this. Ve'erastich li la'olam, ve'erastich li b'tzedek, u'v'mishpat u'v'chesed u'v'rachamim, ve'erastich li be'emuna, ve'yadat et Adonai. And I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness, in justice, in kindliness, and in mercy. And I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the eternal. Okay, those lines are from Hosea, and they are recited sometimes under the chuppah, right, the wedding canopy. And they are also recited here in the morning. And I think this is sort of, we'll have to close now, but I'll stay if people have further questions. But I think that the symbolism there of reciting those is to say that I am actually, part of what I'm doing with tefillin, and this is the last sort of symbolic piece, is I'm binding myself to God, right? Like I am actually, that's the idea. This looks very like, you know, kind of like leather bindings, right? And indeed, there's some of the symbolism here is that once the straps become part of the ritual, then in strapping myself, I'm strapping myself to the tradition, I'm strapping myself to God. I am binding myself to God, and the language that the tradition chooses to use is the language of marriage, of that kind of binding, not the binding of a slave, but the binding of two people together in loving embrace. Okay, so that's sort of where tefillin ends. And then we go on and pray the rest of the service. Again, you know, my custom would be to have the prayer shawl up above the head, right? So it looks something like this, right? But yours might, and this, you know, this is like the cocoon. Yours might be down on the shoulders, right? And then, of course, to return once more to the gendered conversation, there are all kinds of different practices around. Some women wear a talit but not tefillin. Some women wear both. Some women don't wear either. So that's another conversation that we can have at another time. But for our purposes, the assumption is that these are mitzvot that all of us should be aspiring towards. They are very standard, common mitzvot that we do while we are praying the morning prayer. And they are among the first prayers we say in the day. So I hope we've gotten some sense of where they come from and how they got to be what they are. We did a little bit of racing, so I hope that I didn't leave anyone confused or unclear. But I'll stay after if folks have questions, and we'll end here. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Dr.
All
Koch.
right.
Thank you.
Dr. Koch,
Wonderful.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Yeah, my
This
pleasure.
is
My
wonderful.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Amazing.
Any final questions? Any things? I'll keep it open until 7:15 if folks. continue to
Rabbi,
have-
I've been told, and maybe for years now that I'm single, that I don't need to wear a talus to shul. So I haven't been doing that. Is there a custom? Is that a custom, or is it?
Yeah, it is. It is. In fact, I didn't wear a talus until I got the job at Ikar because I'm not married. And my custom and the Ashkenazi custom is to not wear a talus, assuming, by the way, that you're wearing tzitzit katan. You wear tzitzit, but you don't wear a talus until you get married. The reasons for that are, like, I've heard different reasons, like, oh, they just didn't have money. It would be part of the like money that they would get from a family, you know, dowry or something they would use to, like, I don't know the reasons, but I think another reason is that it's just an indicator. So that you know, like married women cover their hair in traditional Jewish societies, so married men cover their, you know, shoulders, so to speak. Yeah. Hal.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously things have progressed since I was in day school in the 1950s in Louisville, Kentucky, because they were very concerned that I wrote with my left hand because they were worried I wouldn't be able to put on tefillin properly. So,
Oh, wow.
no, I mean, it was an issue. It didn't scar me or anything, but at least, you know, ambidextry is now the standard.
Yeah.
So I have a
that's
question,
right.
as long as Hal got this.
Again, just to repeat that, we put it on our weak hand, right? So you put it on the hand that you won't need to use for other things.
Right.
And the obvious reason is because you were assumed to like be walking around with these. So you would use your good hand for things. You would have your tefillin on your other hand. Yeah, Kathy.
Yeah, I was wondering, so why isn't the word Totavot used? I kind of like the idea of using this word. We have no idea what it is, you know. but so anyway,
I think it's on some level. So the word that we do use is tefillin, which is a strange word, but it is obviously related to the word for prayer itself, tefillah. And these are, I once had to translate a book that used the word, and I translated it as prayer boxes, right? Because that's essentially what that. Why we don't use Totavot, I don't know, except that I think it's partially because we're not sure what Totavot are. So I think it does demonstrate a little bit of uncertainty as to whether we got this right altogether, right? Matt? Nothing? No?
No, I
Anyone else?
didn't have-
Florine, you okay? Wishing you health, Florine. Wishing you health. Yeah. Anyone else? All right. All right.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Now they're on. You see what happens? Okay, we
I'm
just have a
sorry.
few minutes left. Yeah, go ahead.
It's actually about last week's class, if it's okay. The first prayer we say when we wake up, I cannot remember the name, but the first thing that you say, thank you God for returning my soul.
Moda'ani, right?
The
Or
moda'ani.
moda'ani, yeah.
Yeah, so my question is, if you take naps during the day, do you say this every time you wake up?
Great question. No, it is, it's a prayer that you say only once a day, once in the morning. Yeah, it's a good question.
Okay.
I mean, the similar question is asked around the morning blessings, which we'll say now, and it's asked in various ways. First of all, do you say it every time you wake up? And another version of your question is, what if you didn't sleep? Do you say morning blessings? And that becomes actually a problem every Shavuot when the custom is not to sleep, right? And there's a real debate there, actually. So it's a great question. But the presumption is you say them only once a day, and that the blessings of the morning, the blessings of Torah, the moda'ani blessings, they cover you, so to speak, throughout the day. Okay, we got 1 minute left here.
Real quick. I never was told, but why don't we put tefillin on Shabbat? I mean, I don't.
Good question. It's because tefillin are considered an oat, a sign. Remember what I said? Shabbat is also described as an oat. And because of that, you don't need another sign when you're in a sign. The whole day is considered, your observance of Shabbat is considered the sign that you are projecting. We didn't have enough time tonight to really dig into the meaning of like an oat, a sign. But it's because Shabbat sort of takes care of it that you don't need another oat on Shabbat and holidays. So that's the answer to that question.
You should do more of this just because there's so much around it. And all I've ever learned is the mechanics. And to have this depth would be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that. This is a little bit of an experiment for me. And I can see just by doing it that time-wise, it would have been better to have a whole class on Talit and then a whole class on tefillin. But I also want to try and cover some ground, and so these things come in one fell swoop. So I just taught them together tonight. But yeah, I can feel how kind of valuable and just crunchy this information is. Right? This is your Wheaties, your Jewish Wheaties. Like this is like really core stuff. So it's good to be able to really pick through it. And as you said, Matt. The instructions that we usually get around it are either just like, oh my gosh, what's a sign and what's it mean to remember? Just sort of lofty, abstract, philosophical conversations, or here's how you do it: 1 step, 2 step, 3 step, 4 step, and we really do need to see both of those things together to have an appreciation, because otherwise it's just a set of instructions that don't mean anything, right? So yeah, that's what I'm shooting for, is some kind of synthesis between the meaningful, the symbolic, and then the practical ritual. All right, I think I do have to close tonight because there are also people running our Zoom, so don't want to keep us on too late. But good to learn with you all. We'll be back next week, and we'll take a look at morning blessings. If you have any other questions, I think Amy had one earlier just about more source information. Is anything that you feel like that was not clear, or I need more information? I really don't want to leave you in that state, so please feel free to write me directly, and I can try to continue to respond to questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you all.
Good night.
It's been very informative.
Thank you,
Very.
Rabbi.
Thank you.
Peter from Chicago. Bye-bye, Rabbi.